What historical fact you find insane is not commonly known? Ancient Romans would put sandals on the hands of sleeping people, then tickle their face so they would slap themselves. Before shaving cream, obviously. That's where BC comes from, before shaving cream. Veni, vidi, titillavi. Every time I see Latin it reminds me of a poem written in a Latin exercise book by a bored schoolboy. Latin is a language dead as dead could be. First it killed the Romans, and now it's killing me. Between 1864 and 1870 Paraguay fought a war with Brazil, Uruguay and Argentina that by some estimates killed as much as 70% of its population, with up to 90% of its adult male population dying or fleeing the country. What the fuck? What happened? It's called the War of the Triple Alliance usually. The Paraguayans are usually described as the foolish aggressors. Summarizing badly, Paraguay wanted to control a crucial river basin in the region, Rio de la Plata. This is the second largest river basin in South America. Before the war, Paraguay had entered into a conflict with Uruguay which led to an alliance between Argentina, Brazil and Uruguay which lasted through the oncoming war. So I guess Paraguay was vastly outnumbered, though the cause of high mortality isn't strictly war battles, as a lot of people died from disease due to poor hygiene, food scarcity and infections, as this was pre-antibiotics. Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, was present at 3 different presidential assassinations. After McKinley, he decided not to accept any more invitations. Robert Lincoln was also once saved on a train platform by John Wilkes Booth's older brother Edwin, also a famous actor of the time. That's not all. Robert Todd Lincoln also dated, even if back in that time you wouldn't have used this term, Lucy Lambert Hale, who was a popular beauty of her time, in Washington, D.C. They never officially got together, but remained good friends. By early 1865, she was often seen together in public with another man, one she was clandestinely engaged with. On March 4, 1865, the couple attended Lincoln's second presidential inauguration with a ticket that Lucy had procured through her father, a prominent U.S. senator. Now, you wouldn't guess the name of Hale's fiancé, John Wilkes Booth. Yeah, that guy. From the 1930s to the 1970s, approximately 1/3 of Puerto Rico's female population underwent sterilization. Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin were born on the same day. Charles Darwin and Steve Irwin had the same pet tortoise. The Netherlands sends Canada 20,000 tulips every year for liberating them during WW2. The Netherlands also has a cemetery dedicated to Canadian fallen troops. Source: EN. Wikipedia.org/wiki/Canadian_tulip_festival #history. EN. Wikipedia.org/wiki/Grosbeak_Canadian_war_cemetery. Canada gave refuge to the Dutch royal family during the war, and Princess Margriet was born in the Ottawa Civic Hospital. That hospital was temporarily declared to be extraterritorial by the Canadian government, so she would not be born in Canada. Therefore she is not a Canadian citizen and retained her eligibility to inherit the Dutch throne. Mongolian invasion of Japan was stopped by a typhoon. When they tried again, they were stopped by another typhoon. To this day these were the only 2 typhoons recorded in that place. Mostly true. Note, the first invasion force encountered a typhoon while retreating back to China after decisive losses. The second invasion force 7 years later was unable to land on shore for several months due to new Japanese defenses, including perimeter walls, and stayed afloat just off the coast until the second storm hit. The Statue of Liberty is a monument to the abolition of slavery, which is why there is a set of broken chains hidden near her feet. Yeah, they pretty much bury the lead with that one. More people died during the production of the V-2 rocket than were killed by it as a weapon of war. I know the conditions were atrocious and calling them brutally inhumane would be an understatement, but this was also because a Spanish guy codenamed Garbo had offered to spy for the Nazis and immediately turned on them, and part of that was giving them incorrect information about where the V-2s were landing, saying they were landing more south than they did, so the V-2 launchers kept aiming them farther and farther north of London where they'd land in much less densely populated areas. Garbo's one of the greatest double agents in history. He'd seen what the fascists did in Spain, so when WW2 broke out he tried to offer his services to the British. The British turned him down on the grounds that he was, well, just some guy, so he decided screw it, he'd do it himself. So he convinces the Germans he's living in Britain and has a small network of loyal agents working for him and starts sending them false information. The German somehow believed this despite him actually living in Portugal and relying entirely on a tourist guide to London for details to include in his reports. He becomes so trusted that the Germans stop trying to set up any more spy networks in Britain, and eventually convinces the British to hire him as a genuine agent. Badass. For people in the UK, it's that blackcurrants and blackcurrant flavour are largely unknown in the USA. In the UK, everything purple is blackcurrant flavoured, not grape. The reason is blackcurrants carry a fungus that is lethal to white pine, which is one of the USA's top timber exports. The Chinese sparrow hunt in 1960. It was to protect crops, but it allowed invasions of locusts that no longer had a predator, and this caused the Great Chinese Famine. Oh damn, I just typed this out as well. The cherry on the cake was that sparrows actually weren't even eating the crops in the first place. The Pony Express lasted only a year and a half. And only due to Mormons massacring non-Mormon wagon trains during the Mormon War, when Brigham Young went full-on sovereign and tried to declare an independent Mormon nation and declared open season on any non-Mormons. Humans developed agriculture around 12,000 years ago. By storing grain, huge numbers of rodents flourished. Cats showed up to eat the rodents, and humans learned that if they took care of the cats would control the rodents. Therefore, it was the invention of agriculture that led to the domestication of the house cat. It gets even weirder. Cats basically domesticated themselves, because natural selection favored those individuals that were brave enough to associate with humans and get all those tasty rodents. Stegosaurus died out 145 million years ago, T-Rex 72 to 65 million years ago. The Stegosaurus was as old to the T-Rex as the T-Rex is to us. Grasses evolved about 70 Maya. Humanity was likely nearly wiped out about 900,000 years ago, when our ancestors were reduced to about 1280 breeding individuals and stayed around that many for 117,000 years. Like the article mentioned, it's amazing that this tribe of 1280 people managed to live and reproduce for 117,000 years without anything wiping them out. Gotta hand it to M for that. The Canadian-Denmark Whiskey War was probably the most polite war ever. It involved a small island off the coast of Greenland. The Canadians claimed it by putting the Canadian flag and bottles of Canadian whiskey on the rock, and the Danes would replace it with schnapps and the Danish flag. Both sides reached an agreement to split the island in 2022. I'm guessing this is more well known to Canadians and Danes than some of the rest of us. During Prohibition, grape concentrate bricks called Vineglow were sold. On the packaging, it included a very specific warning: after dissolving the brick in a gallon of water, do not place the liquid in a jug away in the cupboard for 20 days, because then it would turn into wine. During the Irish famine, the Choctaw Nation from the USA sent financial aid to them, and while a small amount at the time, it was seen as a great gesture. In return, during COVID, many Irish people donated money to the Navajo Nation to help them. There's a statue in County Cork to commemorate it as well. Here is one source. And another. A very recent historical fact that is weirdly not talked about as much as it should be: Microsoft had accumulated such a big monopoly over the personal computer market through the 80s and 90s that in 1997 Microsoft was nearly broken apart by the US government. In an attempt to avoid an investigation, Microsoft invested nearly $150 million into a then failing Apple computer to give the US government less ammunition in a potential antitrust case. This saved Apple from bankruptcy and helped them to become one of the biggest tech companies in history. Microsoft, however, profited off of this investment. In 2003, Microsoft sold their shares in Apple for nearly $600 million. We have historic proof of the Lewis and Clark expedition because they took with them mercury pills. The mercury passed through their digestive tract and we've run into mercury deposits.